Australia's drug market is the most lucrative in the world for criminals. The profits to be earned from trafficking large quantities of cocaine and methamphetamine have never been greater as criminals from around the globe look to gain a slice of the $100 billion plus industry and contribute to the increasing epidemic of drug abuse in the country. One man stands out amongst these individuals vying for power in this increasingly competitive market, and he has managed to rise to the top of the heap completely out of nowhere and operates so discreetly that to this day he has never faced any serious criminal charges. That man is Angelo Pandeli, the Australian national president of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. Born in 1971 in Whyalla, South Australia, to working-class Turkish immigrant parents, Pandeli's parents ran a chain of pubs in addition to owning the Sundowner Hotel in Whyalla. While still a child, Pandeli's family would relocate to Adelaide, the capital of South Australia and one of the country's largest cities. And this would also be where a young Pandeli would get his start in criminality. He would eventually meet a man by the name of John Pike, a notorious figure in Adelaide's nightlife scene who has long been accused of having links to outlaw bikers. Pike owned the Heaven nightclub, which was a popular hangout for members of the Adelaide chapter of the Hells Angels. Seeing potential in him, Pike would hire young Angelo Pandeli as a bouncer at Heaven, and Pandeli would eventually become acquainted with members of the Hells Angels who frequented the club. In 2000, he would become a full-patch member of the Adelaide Hells Angels and quickly move into drug trafficking while still providing security for nightclubs in the local area. By the mid-2000s, Pandeli was doing so well that he owned a $2 million mansion in Adelaide. However, around that same time, the local police raided his mansion, bringing a great deal of attention to Pandeli's criminal activities. Sometime around 2004, he would relocate to Sydney, where he picked up right where he had left off and increased his stature in the Australian underworld. Upon relocating, Pandeli promptly joined the Sydney chapter of the Hells Angels, which at that time was led by a man named Felix Lyle. He would become an influential member of the chapter, and after Lyle was convicted of fraud charges in 2012, Pandeli would become the president of the City Crew chapter in Sydney, and around this time would also become the Australian national president of the Hells Angels, making him the most powerful member of the group in the country, in charge of more than a dozen chapters and more than 200 men. A couple of years after rising to the top of the Hells Angels hierarchy, Pandeli faced his first legal challenge when he was indicted for tax fraud by the Australian Tax Office in relation to tax returns filed for the 2014-2015 financial year. This case of tax fraud was initiated by Operation Morpheus, a task force composed of members of local and federal authorities across Australia that aims to curtail the activities of outlaw motorcycle gangs. But despite the efforts of the Australian authorities, Pandeli would plead guilty to these charges but was cleared when his lawyer, Warwick Corn, submitted an affidavit in which his accountant took the blame for Pandeli's tax issues, claiming that he had failed to send the returns properly. Pandeli had dodged his first real legal threat, and in the immediate aftermath of his legal victory, he made a bold move and relocated himself and his family to Dubai, where he would truly cement himself as an international player, not only in the Hells Angels but in the international drug trade. After being based out of Dubai for 3 years while continuing to operate his criminal empire back in Australia, Angelo Pandeli in 2021 was named as one of the leaders of the newly created commission. The commission was created in 2021 by Mark Buttle, the world commander of the Comancheros, the most powerful outlaw motorcycle gang in Australia. The commission was created in order to monopolize the trafficking of cocaine and meth into Sydney, requiring anyone moving drugs in Sydney to pay a percentage to the commission. Along with Pandeli and Buttle, other members of the commission include Hakan Ayik, another member of the Comancheros, Michael Tu, a native of Hong Kong with triad links, and finally George Dibb, a Lebanese businessman and the owner of Metro Petroleum, which is Australia's largest independent gas station franchise operator. Forging strong links with meth manufacturers in Southeast Asia and with cocaine traffickers in South America and Mexico, the commission would come to control a drug empire which by 2021 was estimated to be worth $1.5 billion. The group has even been linked to a $1 billion shipment of meth which was seized in Western Australia. In addition to forging this alliance with Australia's other most prolific drug traffickers, Angelo Pandeli would form an alliance with another criminal organization based out of Dubai that would also enhance his stature internationally. At some point, while based out of Dubai, Pandeli would link up with the Irish Kinahan cartel. The Kinahan cartel, led by Christy Kinahan and his sons Daniel and Christy Jr., are one of the top cocaine trafficking organizations worldwide, allegedly responsible for a third of the European cocaine trade, all from their base in Dubai. Pandeli has allegedly teamed up with the Kinahans in recent years to smuggle tens of millions of dollars worth of cocaine from Colombia to Europe and often onwards to Australia, where a single gram of cocaine costs more than $200, whereas in Europe it only fetches around $90. With the help of Pandeli, the Kinahans have been able to expand into the Australian market, where Pandeli's Hells Angels associates operate as its distribution network within the country. This link between the Kinahans and Angelo Pandeli would come to light in 2024, the same year that Pandeli's life in Dubai would come crashing down. In August of 2024, Pandeli was arrested and detained by the Dubai authorities for unknown reasons. His arrest came just days before he was due to travel to Cancun, Mexico, to attend a national gathering of Hells Angels members from all across the world, where chief amongst the topics of conversation were allegedly the importation of drugs into Australia. Then, just a week after his arrest, Pandeli was put on a plane and deported back to Australia, where he was immediately taken into custody by the Australian authorities. To this day, the exact reasons for Pandeli's banishment from Dubai have not been revealed. Soon after being returned to Australia and detained, he was released from custody without charge, despite the allegations leveled at him in recent years as being at the very top of the Australian drug trade. This makes it all the more mysterious as to why he was deported from Dubai when there were no plans to charge him with any crimes. Angelo Pandeli was now back on the streets of Australia, much more powerful and untouchable than he had been when he departed its shores 7 years prior. Pandeli last made headlines in January of 2025 when he sued News Corp Australia, one of Australia's largest media companies. The lawsuit concerns publications chronicling Pandeli from January to September of 2024 by 3 of the conglomerate's publications, in which allegations were made that he controlled Australia's illegal drug trade and that he was in alliance with the Kinahan cartel, who by this time had been sanctioned by the United States Treasury Department. Court documents relating to the case state, quote, "Pandeli has been gravely injured in his personal reputation and has suffered and will continue to suffer substantial hurt, distress, and embarrassment," end quote. Also contained in the document was the statement that, quote, "An ongoing, repeated, unjustified, and coordinated campaign used sensationalist language, gratuitously named Mr. Pandeli's wife, included a pixelated photo of his children, and made no reasonable attempt to get his version of events." Just a couple months later, in March of 2025, Pandeli would drop his case against News Corp Australia and slink back into the shadows, where he hasn't been heard from since. Despite being one of Australia's most high-profile criminals and allegedly being at the helm of a criminal empire, smuggling more than $1 billion worth of cocaine and methamphetamine into Australia, Angelo Pandeli remains a free man in his home country, allowing him to continue to operate unhindered at the highest levels of the international drug trade as the Australian national president of the Hells Angels. Will Pandeli ever see his day in court? Most likely, but it may not be anytime soon, and the fact that he hasn't faced any serious charges for the entire duration of his criminal career speaks volumes as to how elusive he is despite his reputation. There is no doubt that the police in Australia will continue to target him with all of the resources at their disposal until they can one day put him behind bars for contributing to the country's drug epidemic, which in 2025 is said to have increased by more than 30% from 2024. Until that day, however, Angelo Pandeli will continue to earn billions of dollars despite any pressure from law enforcement, and he will continue to flood Australia with illicit drugs in league with the most powerful criminals on the planet.